There's been an unwritten rule for women seeking political office. If you want to win, play it safe and don't call attention to your gender. But the messages that some female candidates are releasing bucks that long-held trend. Why is this happening now? And are women in this region running for office following suit? I discussed this recent trend with Rebecca Townsend, University of Hartford Assistant Communication Professor, and Linda O'Connell from the League of Women Voters.
Well, many women do feel some constraints on their messaging. It's really hard to be a woman. We face a double bind. When we are active in politics, we have to face the issue of competence or femininity. Do we play up our womanhood or our femininity, rather, or our competence in our political frame?
Why has it been and or? Why can't it be competence and?
That's a really tough question. It's a catch-22 that people have studied for years and years and years. We don't know why women are seen as, if they are feminine, they are therefore not competent. But the frame exists. And we also, there's some research that shows that Karen Vasby Anderson and Christy Horton Sheeler have shown that there are 4 basic frames that will constrain women's messaging. They are either the pioneer, the first woman to do X, Y, or Z, the puppet, somebody who's been pushed into this position by somebody else, the hostess or the beauty queen who's only focused on their appearance, or who the media focus only on their appearance, and the unruly woman, somebody who cannot be controlled. And they've done this analysis of women in executive political messaging, and they found that these frames do not help women to break out of those double binds, that major double bind.
And interestingly, lately, we're seeing something quite different, whether it's locally here with Tahir Amatul Wadud. She's running against Congressman Neal. So she's a Democrat running against a long-sitting Democrat. So that's one big difference we've seen. But she's also a devout Muslim woman. She's a mother of several children. And so these are different things that in the past we would have seen a campaign, maybe someone recommending that the campaign shy away from these things, I would think. Do you think that's the case? And if so, why? Would she more often be told to shy away from those things?
Well, from what I've been hearing from the multiple women candidates who are running in our area, there is really a strong sense of needing to run as yourself. That running as a feminist, running unabashedly as a woman, but essentially running with integrity. And I think that that's a large share of the conversation locally. Lindsay Sabadosa, who is running in the Upper Valley, really said, we will lose if we do not run with integrity as ourselves.
So this authenticity piece
is a big piece here.
And we're seeing it nationally too. So let's take a look at some video. We're going to see a clip from Martha McSally, who's running for Congress in Arizona, Dana Nessel, who's running for Attorney General in Michigan, and Krish Vinahara, who's running for Governor in Maryland. Let's take a look at some of their campaign ads.
I'm tired of PC politicians and their BS excuses. I'm a fighter pilot, and I talk like one. That's why I told Washington Republicans to grow a pair of ovaries and get the job done.
Ask yourself this. Who can you trust most not to show you their penis in a professional setting? Is it the candidate who doesn't have a penis? I'd say so.
Some say no man can beat Larry Hogan. Well, I'm no man. I'm a mom, I'm a woman, and I want to be your next governor.
You're snickering. What caught you about those?
Well, I wouldn't call it snickering. I would call it a chuckle of enjoyment. And I think it certainly depends on the candidate, what the traffic will bear in terms of the image that she's put out there. A lot of people really want to know what the candidate's thinking. And that authenticity piece is appealing. Obviously, there is the danger of offense. But the question is, who will vote for you? What will they most gravitate to?
And so for you, Professor, the messaging that we're seeing in these, in the final clip we saw that she's breastfeeding her child. Is that meant to show that I'm a woman? Is that meant to show that she's competent? What do you think that the message is that she's sending folks with that?
Well, like members of parliament throughout the rest of the world, in Iceland, Argentina, Spain, Australia, women politicians who have babies who breastfeed do that as part of how they feed their child.
It's a little more taboo here in the States for some reason.
It is taboo, and one of the things that the public life has to accept is that women who want to feed their children that way should be able to do that. Whether or not that's done in an ad, that's for strategic reasons, or perhaps it's something that just occurred during the filming of the ad, as one candidate had happened to her. It's a taboo, but we're breaking those taboos.
Do you think that we would see a male politician bottle feed one of his children as a selling point?
This is so interesting. I was just sharing a picture of a state senator who came to a meeting at which I was and plunked his 2-year-old on his lap and kept her there the entire time. It was his turn. His wife had the other child. And indeed, I don't think that was intended as a prop, but I have kept that picture. It's a very strong statement of, at least it appears, if it wasn't calculated, of a commitment to gender equity.
We pay a lot of attention to the children that women have, women politicians. We don't pay much attention at all to whether male politicians have children. It's not considered an essential part of who they are.
Do you think that this is sort of a pendulum swing, whereas we were talking at the beginning, women for a long time were told, don't mention that you're a woman, no one's really going to notice. Don't embrace that, shy away from it. And now are we seeing the pendulum swinging the other way, where women are essentially almost leveraging the fact that they're a woman?
I don't know that it's leverage yet. Unless a woman who has used that strategy and been successful.
Which gets to my next question. Is this going to make any difference? Is it going to help these candidates win their seat, which is the point, right?
It may help in one crucial area in terms of representation. For all of those young girls and boys who grow up seeing who their elected officials are and who wants to be their elected official, they can see that mothers and fathers both want to be elected, and that's important.
And I think from the perspective of the electorate, there is still an interest on the part of women who are not equally represented in making history. Yeah. Now, we've seen in a very recent election that that is not the thing that is going to clinch it, because we might have had a woman who made history.
But Hillary Clinton didn't win.
Thank you. And now, however, you referenced Tahir Amatul Wadud. Her campaign is definitely talking about the history that would be made if she were to be elected. So it is a point of appeal for many.
Let's look at some of the numbers. Nationally, about 24.9% of females are holding an elected position. And even here in Massachusetts, it's 25% who are elected to hold state office, either in the House or the Senate. Interestingly, Representative Kulik, who said he's resigning, a lot of the people who have come out for that race are females. 5 at last count, but that's shifting too, right now, Linda?
Correct. One of the women has withdrawn for the race. Her Facebook farewell said that she had come to terms with the fact that she could not run this race with 2 young children and not have a negative impact on her family.
And so they're putting family in front of politics.
Correct.
But for you, Professor, that's a lot of women coming out for a singular race. Is that right?
It is.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's largely because it's an open seat. You have an opportunity for everyone to run for something, rather than a candidate as in the race for U.S. Congress, where somebody is running against somebody else. It's seen as running against.
As is the case with Rep. Neal and Tahir Amatul Wadud.
Right.
Right. And again, so with that wide open field, they have the opportunity to present, as you were saying, that authenticity, right? So bring in the fact that I am this, this, and this, here's what my platform is for, but I'm also a woman.
And I have to say, among that field of candidates, the women are somewhat resentful that, oh, sure, we were on it immediately. We knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to be the change. We threw our hats in the ring. And now there are 4 men opposing us 4 women. What's that all about?
So they're expressing some frustration
there. Is some concern.
Since we are seeing so many women locally and nationally getting, or more women than usual, getting into politics, is there now a risk that people aren't following what would maybe in politics be seen as the standard pecking order, where you maybe run for city council or selectmen, and then you sort of go up the chain? People are just getting into either, they're jumping in, they're going to become state rep, they're going to run for Congress. Is that going to get in the way of, you know, having that foundation for them? Is it going to be a problem?
Well, I don't know that all of the women who, at least, well, locally, some of them have been involved in politics before. And even nationally, you have people who have been city councilors. So they have had that path.
Yeah, I didn't mean it for all, but I was thinking specifically for Tahir Amatul-Wadud.
Okay, yeah,
She's
sure.
a first-time candidate. She's a well-established attorney. Yes. She's done a lot of work in the political realm, but she's running for Congress as her first go at office.
And I think that that's one of the things that political watchers are noting, is that because the bench for women is thin, because there's not a history of women in large numbers being in the field, that many of them will. Elizabeth Warren came out of
academia,
not
right.
politics, but academia. So that I think women are reaching into other areas of competence that are aligned with and translate to political effectiveness.
Governor Patrick did as well. He had not held political office before and was seen as, well, what are you doing? You didn't pay your dues. And so had to build a really effective grassroots campaign.
I know you're very active in Longmeadow politics in addition to being a professor. Are you hearing things different on the ground? Are people talking about politics differently in recent year as opposed to the way things were discussed in the past?
I have noticed some things that I think have occurred in some ways because I am the first woman moderator our town has had.
In what way?
I have had women come up to me and ask me questions about participating. They want to participate more, but they feel comfortable asking me. I've had women ask me, is it okay if I bring my baby to town meeting? She may get a little fussy. Young parents, is it okay if my kids come to town meeting? And so I am very welcoming of children at town meeting. That hasn't always been the case. And I think by having a woman in this role, it's important. I was collecting signatures for my reelection, and a mother of a Girl Scout who sold cookies at the last town meeting said to her daughter, do you remember that woman who was at the front of that meeting in front of all those people? And the little girl looked up and says, yeah, this is that woman, she said. And the little girl just looked up at me, and it felt terrific. So it has been a change.
Linda, what do you think the impact of stories like that are on future generations?
I think it's undoubtedly true that Rebecca and those like her will inspire others to see the real possibilities. And I think that there are resources for women candidates now that go a long way to filling in some of the gaps and to encouraging owning and running authentically the Democratic Emerge, mentoring, She Should Run, Vote, Run, Lead. There are multiple crucibles locally. The Women's Funds Leadership Institute for Public and Political and Public Impact, in which women have these very kinds of conversations so that everyone is prepared to deal with the cultural and the political landscape when they get out there.
One other thing to mention is that in a lot of our public discourse, there's a certain crudity, a certain viciousness that can emerge. And one of the things that I'm keen to do is to ensure that all people have a comfort in participating. And I've heard many people inform me that they appreciate the focus on the issues, the focus on making sure that people feel comfortable to participate. And that's something that when more people feel comfortable to participate in the political process, man or woman, it benefits the entire civic body. And so with women's comfort comes other people's comfort as well.